You're listening to Dodge Movie Podcast. Your hosts are Christy and Mike Dodge, the founders of Dodge Media Productions. We produce films and podcasts, so this is a podcast about films. Join them as they share their passion for filmmaking.
The process of making a film can be difficult because when you're in the filmmaking process, you don't have a good idea of what it's like for the viewer. Part of the way that we in the filmmaking business solve this problem is by focus groups. We ask people to watch a film and then tell us what they think. That helps us understand how what we're doing comes across to the viewer. If you would like to participate in that process on one of our films in the future, please send an email to christy@dodgemediaproductions.com and let us know that you're willing to participate in a focus group. In fact, we may avail ourselves of your services in the very near future. Act now.
And you don't have to have any previous film knowledge because we actually want to know if the film is hitting the beats for the average audience. So no previous experience required.
Just passion. I think everyone loves a song that's a power ballad, not just those of us who are fans of Celine Dion. Of course, there's a quip in Spinal Tap, but that's not important right now.
We also did that podcast.
When I saw the trailer for the movie Power Ballad starring Nick Jonas and Paul Rudd,
I think you're right.
I was very happy because I really enjoy the concept of this film addressing how you share credit between collaborative ventures. As we've talked about before, filmmaking is itself a collaborative venture, at least it is in my opinion and how I do it. And I like to have everybody credited who worked on the film to give proper attribution to their efforts. I know that songwriting is different, and I had read that this film parallels a real-life ongoing legal battle, I'm sure there are more than one, of a person who felt like they contributed in a significant way to a song not getting the credit. It may not even be the compensation, although if a song is a huge hit, who would turn down a little bit of coin? But I think also from a creative standpoint, you want to be able to say, this is something that I did, and not have that argument with someone. I think everyone would be like that. I look at famous songwriting duos like Pasek Paul, where there's a clear division of labor between lyrics and music. That seems to be a little easier, but if both individuals are doing some of the music and some of the lyric, how do you separate the contribution? We've talked in the past about, for screenplays, how do you determine who has made a significant enough contribution to the screenplay to deserve credit? In that case, those screenwriters may never have spoken to each other because the script could be handed from one to another. In this film, they are very much in the same room and talking about the same song together, which I think, based on my viewing of the TV series Songland, is normal for this kind of collaboration. So obviously, to the viewer, it seems like it was a joint effort. I don't know how you would apportion one percentage to another. They both worked on the song.
What I loved about the premise of this film and the execution of it was that it was, a lot of times we've seen stories where it's very obvious to the audience and to the people in the room, and there's somebody who's kind of a villain who's taking advantage of another person. And the way this played out, like you said, it seemed very obvious to the audience that yes, they worked on it together, but it was also understandable how one character could forget, because, and you know, we've talked about this before also, is, well, they were both drinking and imbibing in a mind-altering substance.
Right.
And so that's going to mess with your memory. And the way that it played, it was believable that it was accidental. And then I felt like other entities got involved because Nick Jonas's character, he didn't realize what he had done at first. And then he started to question himself. And then his manager basically said, no, this is just a money grab. Don't respond. I'll take care of it.
I thought that character of the manager, who seems like they wanted Jimmy Tatro and he wasn't available, was a well-written character in that he wasn't a mustache twirling Lothario.
He was trying to protect his client.
he was just doing his job
Yep.
and trying to protect his client. And I thought that was good because it showed how the poor artists get ground under the wheels of the industry, and it's not personal. I'm sure it feels personal to the artist who's underneath the ziggurat, but I could see how it's just the way the game works. And one might walk away from this film saying, why would anyone want to be in the music industry watching how this goes? But I think
for a variety
the
of
people who are in the industry, this is what they do. They love to make music.
Yeah.
And much like with filmmaking, you have to play off these competing factors of kind of the art versus the business. That in order for your music to reach people, you probably need to have a label involved. And now you've got a business involved and business concerns versus artistic concerns. So I think that was realistic. I don't know much about the music industry, but it landed to me as a fairly realistic portrayal of people who weren't necessarily out to get Paul Rudd's character,
Right.
but doing their own thing kind of crushed his dreams.
Yep.
So I mentioned to you right after the film that I felt like Paul Rudd's character was not particularly likable to me throughout most of the film, which again maybe is realistic in how an individual who has been pursuing this passion without the commercial success would be in life. But for me, he made a lot of very bad decisions, and the part that I struggled the most with is I felt like his character was not very good to his wife and daughter. And he seemed like he neglected them, in my opinion. He treated them poorly. And maybe I just misread that different, but that's how it landed to me. So it was hard for me to really get on board with that character because I kept feeling like he was being a jerk to his daughter.
Oh, wow. I didn't get that at all. I mean, I think the nature of his job is touring neglectful, I guess, bottom line. And if your wife and daughter think that you're neglecting them by touring, but I think he was trying to provide for his family as well as he was trying to follow his dream. But I felt like there were many scenes where they were a sweet little family, and he, like the opening scene, I mean, I didn't even take that they felt neglected because the wife is like all over him and she's being sweet and loving and kissing on him. In fact, I think somebody says get a room or something. So that doesn't strike me as a wife who's angry or upset. I think when he started focusing on the fact that someone stole his song, he maybe lost sight of them. But I think that that's understandable because if you're trying to, because I think he even worried, am I imagining this? I could have swore I was part of this. And so he was looking for proof to validate his own feelings. And I felt like he was like a dog after a bone, kind of lost sight of his family maybe for a bit because he was trying to pursue this proof that this was his song. But I think as a whole, I don't think, although I do think that there was some low-level resentment going on, because I think anytime you feel that you've sacrificed a certain aspect of your life or a choice maybe you would have made because it was the right thing to do. And in this case, he felt that marrying this woman who I can't remember if they got married because she got pregnant. I thought that or they got married and soon after she got pregnant. So he did kind of curtail some of his career because of the baby. There may have been some low-level resentment, but he realized, no, I made that decision. It was the right decision. Some resentments can creep in, but then you can be reminded, no, I did make this choice and it was the right choice. So if that's what you're talking about, but I didn't get at all that he was neglectful or that him and his daughter even had issues.
Fascinating. I would have to watch it again, but I felt like the first scene that we see the daughter seemed to me like there was a distance between them. And
I just took that as her parents were kissing in front of her, and most teenagers hate that.
Well, and then later in the film, although this is after he has become obsessed with the song, there's a driving review problem. He does not operate a motor vehicle in a safe fashion. And to me, that comes across as not caring for the occupants of said vehicle, so perhaps I'm seeing it through a different lens. But I very much feel like it was Paul Rudd at his appealing best in some sense. This is the kind of character that I think he does a very good job portraying. And I know we were supposed to see him as the sympathetic character, but it didn't quite get there for me because I felt like, as I said, I didn't think that he was taking the best care of his wife and daughter in particular. But again, maybe I misread that. Apologies to the filmmaker if so. Which is a good segue into the filmmaker himself. It was co-written by and directed by John Carney. And we know him for Once was kind of his big breakout hit, Sing Street and Flora and Son. And we both quite loved Flora and Son, which came out a few years back. Yes, we liked the others too, but I seem to think we responded very well to Flora and Son, including Bono's daughter as the lead, Flora.
And she's gone on to do other things that I like.
So from this, we can take that Carney both loves Ireland and music. And there is a pop song, the song in question, at the center of this film that is, boy, a catchy earworm. I was singing it to myself this morning even. And I said, from a production standpoint, if you write a screenplay about a really good pop song, that means you have to write a really good pop song.
Yeah, and they did.
So my thinking was, do you go off with your writing partner and you work on the song first and then you write the script? Because I don't know if you want to write 90 or 100 pages of screenplay with no song to back it up. I think you need that song first before you put the rest of the effort into that film. But maybe they knew each other well enough and took the risk and they wrote the screenplay and started pre-production and said,
I'd love to know the behind the scenes.
I would love to see that, yeah. It wouldn't be funny if it was like, oh, it was originally a reggae song, but then we switched it to pop song, right? Nick Jonas's character is a former boy bander, which I thought was kind of fun.
Yeah.
You probably wouldn't consider the Jonas Brothers a boy band.
Well, except for I was talking to somebody and telling him the premise of this movie, and they said, well, because he was in a boy band. So this person felt so.
Yeah, are Hanson and the Jonas Brothers boy bands? Good question. I don't know. But it was good casting. I told you right after the film that I was pleasantly surprised in Jonas's acting ability. I know him as a musician. I think he's very talented there. And most people get one talent in life, not many. But I thought he did a fantastic job in this role. One could argue it's really close to home, so he didn't have to do a lot of research. But there was some emotional depth to that performance that I think really deserves some credit. I also wondered where the production design people found the house that they put him in. That thing was ginormous. It was probably, if you're into architecture, you might know that house immediately. But it did portray this idea of someone who had a lot of popularity and fame and maybe money, although that comes up in the film. What do you do when you're no longer part of the boy band? I'm sure there are some boy band members that would say they never got that kind of coin. In particular, I think some of Lou Pearlman's groups, they missed out on a lot of the monies. But you could see a person being in that lifestyle and not kind of knowing how to recapture the lightning in a bottle a second time. That must be tough, and we had talked about this before. Would you rather be successful at the beginning of your life or the end of your life? And the problem with success when you're a young person is then how do you follow that up? And I thought that was covered here well. They had an actress playing his girlfriend who had striking green eyes, wonderful, who very much brought in that model person that you would be dating if you were a famous person. And then she eventually ends up leaving him and he undergoes some pressure on his career. So there's an interesting parallel there that both he and Paul Rudd's character are struggling in similar ways, even though one had massive success early in life and the other had a moderate, maybe, success. They both are past their prime in some sense, trying to recapture that. So I thought that was well written and well performed. I don't have any negatives about Paul Rudd's performance. As I said, I had a little bit of an issue with the writing maybe. I really enjoyed his bestie mate, Sandy. He was, I think, a very fun character and not strictly a caricature. I thought they added a little bit of depth there where at one point he talks about not wanting to just be the sidekick that always follows along, which I think is a natural reaction for any human. So that humanized it to me as well. I noticed a little bit of a driving route as well, that they had a little Hyundai hatchback that they drove And I thought that was fascinating. I didn't know to what degree Hyundai had penetrated the British auto market. When I saw the front of the car through the doorway, it was red. I thought it was going to be a Mini Cooper.
I did too.
And it was this little Hyundai hatchback. So that was good. A little fun driving opportunity there. I felt like this film in general played, to me, not specifically Irish. It just felt more British than Irish, and maybe Carney wouldn't be happy with that. But I felt like this was, unlike his previous ones, this one was less about being Irish.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Because I was like, oh no, I was mostly going off of the accent, but I see what you're saying. Maybe steeped in, I don't know. I don't know. I mean, I took it because they said they were living in Ireland. So I just kind of accepted that. I don't know if I have an opinion of whether it read that way or not.
I just, as we were talking, thought perhaps it's because both Rudd and Jonas are Americans. So it gave more of a U.S. feel to
Except
the film.
for, I felt like the film mostly took place in Ireland.
It did take place. I think it said it was shot in Dublin, but I think there were some L.A. scenes that probably were in L.A. But yeah, it was shot mostly, if not all, in Dublin. I felt like, as I remember them once in Sing Street and Flora and Son, had more of a feel that they were about Irish folks, and this was a little bit less so. I always wonder when they have the big concert scenes, how they do those. Do you get people? In most cases now, I assume that they have 20 people and they just composite them digitally to make it look like 8,000 or what have you.
So they do both, because as late as A Star Is Born with Bradley Cooper and Lady Gaga, I know I'm going to forget. I know I've seen an interview where Bradley Cooper, that was a real concert, and they basically just came on and they said, okay, everybody, you get to be in a movie. We're going to shoot this scene. You get to see Lady Gaga sing. Like, most people are not going to be upset that that's the addition to your concert ticket that you weren't anticipating. So I know they do that sometimes. Yes, they do the compositing. Rob Reiner talked about in the first This Is Spinal Tap that they did a call for extras, but they didn't get very many, so they had to shoot it very shallow. Like they just had everybody pressed up against the stage. Then ironically, for the second one, the most recent Spinal Tap that they did, all they had to do was say Spinal Tap was getting together again, and I think the arena that they had found in Louisiana was full in like an hour, because people would be happy to show up and see an additional This Is Spinal Tap concert. So I think they still do it both ways, and yes, I've heard of the compositing. I almost hear of that more when it's a period piece. Like I think even, I want to say, I have a memory of a BTS that I saw about A League of Their Own, and that was one of the first places, but that could have been a practical, like they just painted like people in the stands and put these big pieces of plywood up. Like that's obviously in like the nosebleed seats, because it has to be far away for you to sell it. I think it still happens both ways.
One of my favorites in the Do It Practically is for Pitch Perfect 2, the outdoor World Acapella Championship scene. They just put out a call for fans of the movie to show up.
Yeah.
And they all showed up and stood there for the day while they were filming it, which, of course, they would be rabid fans of the original film, as well as probably knew some of the songs, could sing along. Yeah, so the concert scene that I think of in particular was easy to film in just a soundstage, because it was a medium of Paul Rudd, and there was some girls around him singing his song with the Nick Jonas character.
Yeah. That very much felt like a warehouse or whatever.
Right.
And it didn't really sell as an arena or an auditorium.
But one of the advantages of having your film based around this catchy pop song is Nick Jonas performed it live someplace in the lead up to the film, which of course gets additional press for it. And I think immediately would we see films with songs like How Much Do You Sell, the album for profits. I'm looking at Greatest Showman as an example of something whose soundtrack album sold ginormous amounts of copies. So in this case, I haven't seen a lot so far, but I wouldn't be surprised if that song did very well in the traditional kind of media. Although I don't even know what that means anymore, because do most people listen to it off of YouTube? They don't. Maybe they stream it off of iTunes, but do people buy music anymore? I don't know. But that would be an interesting tie-in, right? So in the old days, we think of like He-Man movies having toys you could purchase. This is not a film where McDonald's is going to have a Happy Meal with the How to Write a Song Without You in there, but it's the same kind of thing of a tie-in, perhaps. It's also interesting to think about, is there any possibility for spin-offs? Because I'm thinking, again, Pitch Perfect 2. I don't think they wrote the first Pitch Perfect intending for a sequel, but it did so well that they thought about it, but then Greatest Showman did fantastic and they didn't make a sequel. I don't know if you could really go that way with here, and this leads into what we talked about. We really like the ending of the film. For superfan Chris, I'm not going to go into detail to spoil it, but I really felt like that was done very well. It told us what we needed to know in a deft, light touch. It wasn't heavy-handed. It wasn't schmaltzy. I really liked how Carney ended the film. I thought that was well done. And I was nervous throughout the film. He definitely had me worried about what was going to happen to the characters, which I think is a good sign, because sometimes with these you get the feeling that it's a stereotype and you know what's going to happen. In this case, they realistically had me questioning. It could have gone several different ways. This is a movie for people who enjoy music and the music writing process, or that artistic creative process. But I think it's also a little bit of a story of these two characters trying to find their way back on path after they had an early success.
Well, and I think the other thing is, what is success?
Right.
And that goes into the ending, which I won't go any further, but I think you have to find a personal reason. I think anytime you put an external metric of success, whether it be dollars or number of albums sold or number of likes or how many followers you have, anytime you kind of put those external metrics on how you define yourself or how you define success, that gets tricky. And so I think that's also the message of this, is that internal satisfaction. It really needs to be paramount in order.
Right. And I think the question of balancing artistic versus financial success really hits home with all filmmakers. I presume Carney is not rolling in teacup giraffe money, even though he's made some really great films. It's hard to get rich making art of any sort. And this really speaks to that. I am curious if we were better friends with Joey Fatone. He's welcome to call in, by the way. How a person who had been in a boy band responded to this material. Based on some of the documentaries we've seen, it seems like it's relatively in line with what we've heard, but I would be curious, somebody who had been through that process, maybe somebody who had written songs, worked as a songwriter for famous folks, how this lands. But it really felt realistic to me. And like I said earlier, I think it's really fundamentally a story about these two characters trying to find who they are. And that, I think, is a timeless theme and works very well in this case. I look forward to more from John Carney. Have no idea what he's got in the pipeline. Maybe he's just resting up from production. But this guy does great work. I've just liked his last 4 films so much. I look forward to stuff from him in the future. Any final closing thoughts on Power Ballad?
No, I agree. It will be an earworm that you won't be too sad about, I don't think. So it's a good song, great acting, beautiful visuals. This John Carney kid knows what he's doing.
Yeah.
I loved Once. I don't remember seeing Sing Street, and watching the trailer, I definitely want to take a second pass at that. And I loved Floor and Son. So I would watch anything this guy made. So I highly recommend this film.
And remember, Dodges never stop, and neither do the movies. Some of our longtime listeners may have already gotten a sticker or two from our podcast, but if you would like the complete sticker pack, so you can compare with your friends or maybe make your neighbors jealous, please send an email to Christy@DodgeMediaProductions.com requesting a sticker pack. Geography does not matter. We will ship internationally.
Yes, and we understand that we have some fans in Korea. Thank you. In Germany, thank you. Australia, we have a couple fans. So we would love to know where you're listening from. We have a new sticker that we are very excited about, designed by our very own Michael W. Dodge, and we would love to send it out to you. So just shoot me an email with your address. And this is not for email collection, although if you would like to be on our newsletter, state that, and I can get you on our newsletter list. But we are not mining for emails. We simply want to show our appreciation for your listenership and happy to send you out a sticker pack. Just ask.
Bonus points for people who post photos on social media of them rocking their DNP stickers.
Yes, that would be amazing.
Thanks for listening to Dodge Movie Podcast with Christy and Mike Dodge of Dodge Media Productions. To find out more about this podcast and what we do, go to DodgeMediaProductions.com. Subscribe, share, leave a comment, and tell us what we should watch next. Dodges never stop, and neither do the movies.